For centuries, it was a kingdom both admired and misunderstood, a power that mirrored Egypt, yet shaped its own bold path. Here, mighty queens led armies. Black pharaohs ruled over Egypt itself, and in cities carved from sun-baked stone, cultures bloomed in rhythms as rich and complex as the land that bore them. Tonight, we fall asleep to the entire story of this incredible realm, the Kingdom of Kush, land of gold and granite, of divine rulers and forgotten cities. A kingdom where the desert sands whisper stories lost to time, and now gently return to us in the quiet of night. We begin at the very foundation of the Kushite world, its geography, people, and place in the flow of ancient history. But before we begin, take a slow breath. Feel the ancient wind drift across the Nubian savanna. Imagine the red cliffs of the eastern desert glowing beneath the sun, and the lap of Nile water against palm-lined shores. Let us now descend gently into the silence of antiquity, where the voices of Kush still speak softly, calmly, through the ruins and the dust. As we close our eyes to sleep, we open the door to a world that once stood at the meeting place of kingdoms, civilizations, and spirits. As we begin our descent into the story of Kush, let us first anchor ourselves in the land itself, a place not only of striking landscapes, but of deep historical currents. Geography is never merely a backdrop in history. It is a silent actor, shaping destinies, nurturing civilizations, and determining which stories are remembered and which are lost beneath the sand. We are now in Nubia, a long ribbon of fertile land stretching from the southern border of Egypt to the region now called Northern Sudan. Along this corridor flows the lifeblood of ancient Africa, the Nile River specifically, the Upper Nile, where the river descends through a series of rugged, stone-choked rapids called cataracts. There are 6 of these great cataracts between Egypt and modern-day Khartoum, and Kush was born in the fertile lands nestled between the 3rd and 6th cataracts, a land of black soil, jagged hills, and golden light. This was the natural cradle of Nubian civilization. To the north lies Egypt, with its linear flow, its well-known pantheon, and its long succession of pharaohs. But Kush's geography is different, rougher, more defiant. Its landscapes breathe a different rhythm. In the narrow floodplains between desert and river, the early Nubian peoples cultivated crops, herded cattle, and built complex societies as early as 3500 BCE. Archaeologists have found traces of prehistoric Nubian cultures, long predating the first Egyptian dynasties, suggesting that Nubia may have even influenced early Egypt more than we once believed. Sites like Kustul and A-group burials show evidence of early kingship, incense burners, and even crowns resembling those of later Egyptian pharaohs. Some scholars argue that the concept of divine kingship itself may have drifted northward from Nubia. But what then was this land called? The Egyptians referred to it as Ta-Seti, land of the bow, a name that hints at the famed Nubian archers who would one day serve as elite warriors in foreign armies. Later still, they would call the rising power in the South Kush a name that would echo across time, even making its way into the Bible. To understand Kush, we must also understand movement. This was not an isolated kingdom. Kush sat at a crossroads north to Egypt, west to sub-Saharan Africa, east to the Red Sea, and south to the heart of Africa. Goods, peoples, languages, and ideas moved here slowly, patiently carried on the backs of donkeys, floated on reed boats, and whispered in desert winds. The region's resources shaped its importance. Kush was rich in gold, ivory, ebony, incense, and iron, all highly prized in the ancient world. But just as vital was its role as a cultural intermediary, where African traditions blended with Nile Valley sophistication, creating a distinct civilization with its own gods, art, and worldview. The people of early Kush likely spoke languages related to the Nilo-Saharan family, though the exact linguistic lineage remains debated. What is certain is that their visual culture was bold and expressive. Their pottery, for example, was often more refined than Egypt's during early periods, burnished, painted, and beautifully shaped. As we float gently through time, we come to the first major kingdom to rise from this Nubian soil, Kerma. But before we arrive at its gates, let us pause and reflect. The land of Kush was never merely a shadow of Egypt. It was older than we thought, more complex than we imagined, and uniquely itself. A land of river and rock, of cattle and kings, of hidden tombs and silent pyramids, and always, always of mystery. As the sun rises over the eastern hills, let us now follow the Nile a little farther downstream, to the city of Kerma. The Nile curls like a dark green ribbon through the desert. On its western bank, just below the third cataract, an ancient city rises from the plain. It is quiet now, a field of broken mud brick and worn stone, but once this place breathed power. It was called Kerma, and it is here that the Kingdom of Kush first truly awakens. Kerma emerges around 2500 BCE during Egypt's Old Kingdom. But while Egypt was building pyramids at Giza, the people of Kerma were building something different, a civilization born of Nubian soil, with its own customs, its own rulers, and its own sacred rhythms. At its height, Kerma was not a village or a trading post. It was a capital, a religious and administrative center that governed a wide swath of Nubia. The scale of its architecture still astonishes archaeologists. At the heart of the city stood the Western Defufa, a massive mud brick structure that may have been a temple, palace, or symbolic gateway. 3 stories tall and imposing even in ruins, it is unlike anything found in Egypt. Its base is still visible today, rising like a stepped mesa from the sands. Surrounding the Defufa were homes, workshops, granaries, and burial grounds. The people of Kerma were skilled artisans. They crafted polished ceramics, stone tools, and elaborate jewelry from gold and faience. They buried their elite with care, draping them in linen and laying offerings at their feet, cattle, weapons, and even human attendants in some royal tombs. One of the most remarkable aspects of Kerma is its cemeteries. The royal tumuli, or burial mounds, are enormous, some over 300 feet in diameter. Within them, kings and queens rested beneath circular stone tombs, surrounded by servants and companions. These burials speak not only of power, but of deeply held beliefs about the afterlife, kingship, and cosmology. The rulers of Kerma were not merely political figures, they were sacred beings, perhaps even gods on earth. What is striking about Kerma is how distinctly Kushite it feels, even in these early stages. While there are Egyptian imports in the tombs, scarabs, amulets, and pottery, the overall culture is Nubian. Hairstyles, burial customs, and artistic styles all suggest an identity rooted in African traditions, not foreign imitation. Still, Kerma's story cannot be told without Egypt. The two civilizations were neighbors, competitors, and at times, rivals. During Egypt's Middle Kingdom, contact between the two grew intense. Trade flowed northward: gold, ivory, exotic animals, and in return, Egypt sent linen, wine, and soldiers. Over time, this uneasy partnership frayed. By the time of Egypt's Second Intermediate Period, around 1700 BCE, Egypt had grown weak, divided between foreign Hyksos rulers in the north and fragile dynasties in the south. Kerma saw its moment. Under a powerful king whose name is now lost, the Kushites launched military campaigns deep into Egypt. They sacked forts, challenged pharaohs, and for a brief moment, threatened to tip the balance of Nile Valley power. Egyptian records from Thebes speak of the vile Kush, reflecting both hostility and fear, and yet, behind the language lies a grudging recognition. Kerma was not a province. It was a kingdom, a sovereign power, organized and capable. For a century or more, Kerma stood tall, its kings controlling both trade and territory. But Egypt eventually recovered. Under Ahmose I, the founder of the new kingdom, Egyptian armies pushed southward with renewed force. Around 1500 BCE, Kerma was conquered, its temples razed, its elite scattered. Egypt now claimed Nubia as its own building temples, imposing administration and controlling the gold trade. But Kush did not vanish. Like the river it lived beside, it bent, but did not break. Egyptian occupation would last for nearly 5 centuries, yet beneath the surface, Kushite culture endured. In villages, in language, in burial practices, and in memory, the soul of Kush remained, and when the Egyptian hold weakened, it rose again. But before we move forward, let us reflect. Kerma was not merely the prelude to Kush, it was the first great expression of a Nubian kingdom, a place where architecture defied the desert, where rulers commanded loyalty and fear, where a city flourished bold, unique, and free. Though its name may be whispered less often than Thebes or Memphis, Kerma was no less real, no less grand. It stands today as a testament to a people who carved a kingdom from stone and silence, and whose story still sleeps beneath the sun. As we drift further into the life of the Indus Valley, we enter a world not of kings or conquests, but of craftspeople, the quiet architects of prosperity. In every home, in every workshop, we see the patient rhythm of hands shaping earth, carving stone, stringing beads. The Indus economy was a subtle symphony, with each artisan, farmer, and trader contributing to its enduring harmony. We begin with the artisans, the true pulse of Indus cities. From the smallest hamlet to the largest urban center, the archaeological remains show an astonishing diversity of craft specialization. There were potters, bead makers, seal carvers, metal workers, weavers, shell cutters, and more, each working with remarkable skill. The pottery of the Indus people is both functional and beautiful. Made on slow-spinning wheels or by hand, these vessels display geometric patterns, zigzags, chevrons, and floral designs painted in black or red slip. Some vessels feature stylized animals or birds, while others are unadorned, used for cooking, storing, or carrying water. Pottery kilns have been found in many settlements, often grouped together in clusters, suggesting neighborhoods devoted to ceramic production. But it is perhaps in bead making that Indus craftsmanship reaches its finest expression. Beads were made from a wide range of materials: carnelian, agate, jasper, steatite, lapis lazuli, shell, copper, and faience, a glazed, non-clay ceramic. Some were simple and round, others long and tubular, with etched or drilled designs. The precision is stunning. Some beads are so small and uniformly shaped that it is difficult to imagine how they were created without magnifying tools. At sites like Lothal and Chanhudaro, archaeologists have found entire bead-making workshops, complete with drills, furnaces, polishing stones, and raw materials. The presence of discarded fragments and unfinished pieces allows us to reconstruct the process step by step from raw stone to polished gem. These beads were likely worn as jewelry, sewn into garments, or traded as valuables. Next, we find the seals square, often palm-sized tokens carved from steatite, a soft stone that hardens when fired. Each seal bears a unique combination of animal motifs and script. The most common animal is the unicorn, a fantastical creature shown in profile, always with a single curved horn. Other animals include bulls, elephants, rhinoceroses, crocodiles, and birds, each rendered with a delicate, almost meditative precision. The seals may have been used for identification like signatures or trademarks, perhaps pressed into wet clay to mark goods or property. Others might have had symbolic or ritual purposes. Some include a ritual stand or an object resembling an altar. Because we cannot yet decipher the Indus script, their full meaning eludes us, but their presence in trade centers and their uniformity suggest they were deeply woven into economic and cultural life. Now, let us step outside the cities, beyond the kilns and courtyards, to explore the web of trade that connected the Indus Valley to the world. The Indus people were not isolated. They were connected by river, desert, and sea to distant lands and cultures. Within their own domain, goods flowed along the Indus River and its tributaries carried by boat, cart, or caravan. Agricultural surpluses from the fertile floodplains moved north and west. Raw materials from distant hills made their way into cities for refinement. Among the most prized imports was lapis lazuli, a deep blue stone sourced from the Badakhshan region of present-day Afghanistan. It was brought hundreds of miles through rugged terrain, eventually reaching Indus workshops where it was cut, drilled, and polished. Other imports included copper from Rajasthan and Baluchistan, tin from Central Asia, and gold possibly from southern India. From the coast, at sites like Sutkagandur and Balakot, we find evidence of maritime trade. The Indus people were likely skilled sailors, navigating the Arabian Sea in flat-bottomed boats. Their goods beads, cotton textiles, ceramics, and seals made their way to distant ports in the Persian Gulf and Mesopotamia. In Mesopotamian texts, dating as early as 2350 BCE, we find references to a place called Meluha, described as a distant, wealthy land known for its exotic goods and seafaring merchants. Many scholars believe Meluha refers to the Indus Valley. Artifacts from Indus cities, especially seals and beads, have been found in Mesopotamian cities like Ur, Lagash, and Akkad, while Mesopotamian cylinder seals have been found in Indus sites as well. This suggests not only trade but possibly diplomatic or cultural exchange. Perhaps Indus merchants lived in foreign ports. Perhaps they brought stories, languages, and customs with them, though. Again, the lack of deciphered writing keeps their voices just out of reach. The dockyard at Lothal is one of the most compelling pieces of this maritime puzzle. Measuring over 200 meters in length, this rectangular structure was built from kiln-fired bricks and lined with a sluice gate to control water flow. Nearby were warehouses, workshops, and a bead-making center. Though some scholars debate whether this was a true dock, its engineering suggests deep knowledge of tides, currents, and construction, and a desire to connect inland cities with oceanic routes. And what of agriculture, the silent backbone of this civilization? Farming sustained the Indus cities. Along the floodplains of the Indus, Gagar-Hakra, and Sarasvati rivers, the soil was fertile and generous. The main crops were wheat, barley, millet, sesame, and peas. The Indus people also grew cotton, perhaps the world's earliest cotton cultivators, and may have pioneered the art of spinning and weaving cotton textiles. They used plows, likely drawn by oxen, and irrigation channels to manage seasonal water. Storage granaries, often found on raised platforms, helped manage surplus and prevent spoilage. These agricultural systems required planning, cooperation, and an understanding of seasonal rhythms, all signs of an organized, deeply rooted rural economy. Animals were integral too. Humped zebu cattle, water buffalo, sheep, goats, pigs, and chickens were domesticated and used for milk, meat, labor, and hides. In more arid regions, camels may have been used for long-distance transport. The Indus people also had a close relationship with elephants, as seen in their art and seals, though whether they were domesticated or simply symbolic is still debated. Interestingly, hunting and fishing continued alongside farming. Remains of deer, boar, fish, and fowl suggest a mixed diet and an ongoing connection to the natural world. So what kind of economy was this? It was neither capitalist nor feudal in the modern sense. There is no clear evidence of money or coinage, but barter, standardized weights, and seals suggest regulated exchange. A series of cubical weights made from chert and following binary systems have been found across sites, often stored in boxes alongside balance scales. These were likely used by merchants to measure grains, goods, and precious materials with fairness and consistency. The fact that such weights and measures are uniform across a vast region suggests central coordination or shared norms, a kind of quiet agreement, perhaps enforced not by kings, but by tradition or consensus. And yet, the economy was not simply functional, it was aesthetic. Beauty was not an afterthought. From the curve of a carnelian bead to the polish of a black-slipped bowl, the Indus people infused their crafts with grace. This, too, was part of their legacy, the sense that even trade, even utility, could be elegant. As we gently float back from the workshops and markets, let us pause to imagine an evening in Lothal. The sun settles behind the palm trees. Traders return from the wharf. Beads are packed in linen pouches, weighed and sealed. A potter stacks his final wares inside the kiln. Nearby, a child threads a red bead onto a string, her small hands steady. A merchant scribes an unknown script onto a tiny seal, its impression the final signature of the day's labor. This was a world alive with movement, with exchange, with meaning, and though it lies buried now beneath layers of silence and earth, its rhythms continue to whisper across the centuries. Close your eyes, if you haven't already, and let the soft clang of copper, the hush of spinning wheels, the flicker of lamplight in a craftsman's home carry you further into peaceful rest. As twilight falls gently over the streets of Mohenjo-Daro, we turn inward, away from the noise of markets and workshops, and begin to wonder, what did the Indus people believe? What spirits or gods whispered through their temples, or hovered silently above their rooftops? What stories did they pass from parent to child, and what rituals marked the turning of seasons? The Indus Valley civilization has long stood as an enigma, in part because its people left behind no deciphered texts. They wrote, yes, thousands of short inscriptions, etched into seals, pottery, copper tools, and even ivory. But their script remains unread, its meaning locked away in curved symbols and silent marks. These inscriptions usually contain between 4 and 12 characters. They are written from right to left and display a remarkable consistency across vast distances from Harappa in the north to Dholavira in the south. Some scholars believe the Indus script may not have represented a spoken language at all, but rather functioned more like symbols conveying identity, trade information, or status. Others believe it was a true writing system, now lost to time. Without a Rosetta Stone, a bilingual text to compare it against decipherment remains elusive. Attempts have linked it to Dravidian, Proto-Elamite, Sumerian, or even Munda language families, but none have gained consensus. Still, we can read the symbols, even if not the words. A great many Indus seals feature animals, bulls, elephants, tigers, water buffalo, and the mysterious unicorn. This unicorn, always shown in profile with a single curved horn, may have represented a mythic creature, a clan symbol, or a deity. We cannot be sure. Other seals depict ritual objects, a standard or altar, a ritual bowl, or a seated figure surrounded by wild animals. One such figure has captivated scholars for decades. Often called the Pashupati seal, it shows a horned figure seated cross-legged, a pose reminiscent of yogic meditation, surrounded by an elephant, a tiger, a rhinoceros, and a buffalo, with deer beneath the throne. Some interpret this figure as an early form of Shiva, a major deity in later Hinduism. The name Pashupati means Lord of the Animals, an epithet of Shiva even today. But here we must tread gently. These comparisons with later religious traditions must be made with caution. Continuity is possible, but so is coincidence. The Indus people left no written hymns, no temples with carved deities, no clear pantheon etched into stone. Instead, their spiritual life must be glimpsed in fragments in architecture, in burial practices, and in small symbolic objects. Let us begin with water, the most elemental symbol of renewal. Across Indus sites, we find evidence of ritual bathing. In Mohenjo-Daro, The Great Bath stands as one of the most striking architectural remains. It is a large, rectangular pool approximately 12 meters long and 2.4 meters deep, lined with brick and once filled by a well and drain system. It may have been used for ceremonial purification, akin to later traditions in South Asia, where water symbolizes spiritual cleansing. The Great Bath is surrounded by small rooms, possibly changing chambers or spaces for private rituals. Its construction shows meticulous attention to water-tightness. Layers of bitumen, natural tar, seal the bricks, and covered drains protect against contamination. This focus on cleanliness, order, and water suggests that ritual purity held deep importance, and this is not confined to Mohenjo-Daro. Similar bathing platforms and wells are found throughout the civilization, indicating that the symbolic role of water was widespread, not isolated. Next, we turn to burials. Unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, the Indus people left no grand tombs, no pyramids, and no elaborate mortuary temples. Their burials are simple and varied. Some graves contain full human skeletons laid on their backs, oriented east to west. Others include pottery, beads, bangles, and food offerings. In some cases, we find multiple bodies buried together, possibly indicating family or communal burials. At sites like Harappa and Kalibangan, burial urns hold cremated remains, suggesting different funerary customs, perhaps depending on region, status, or belief. There is little evidence of wealth-based inequality in graves. Most burials are modest, with few grave goods. This may point to a society where spiritual equality was emphasized over social hierarchy, or at least where status was not expressed in death. The absence of monumental temples has led some scholars to propose that Indus religion was more domestic or communal than centralized. Rather than worshipping in towering ziggurats, perhaps the Indus people practiced household rituals, with small altars, offerings, and symbolic objects passed down through generations. Among these objects, we find terracotta figurines, some human, some animal, some hybrid. One of the most common human figurines is the so-called Mother Goddess, a female figure with wide hips, elaborate headdresses, and sometimes exposed breasts. These may have been symbols of fertility, abundance, or protection, but again, we must be cautious. Not all figurines are goddesses. Some may be dolls, toys, or votive offerings. Other figurines show animals: bulls, dogs, birds, and monkeys, often with expressive features and stylized bodies. Some even have movable limbs or wheels, suggesting use as toys for children. Yet others are more abstract, perhaps carried as amulets or worn as charms. In this blend of the sacred and everyday, we catch a glimpse of Indus spirituality, not in towering gods or grand myths, but in gesture, symbol, and silence. The absence of temples does not mean the absence of belief. It may reflect a different kind of religiosity, one woven into daily life, into the rhythms of washing, planting, offering, and honoring the unseen. And then there are the fire altars. At Kalibangan and Lothal, we find brick platforms with circular or rectangular pits, often surrounded by ashes and charred remains. These have been interpreted as fire altars, perhaps used in ritual sacrifice or ceremonial burning. In later Indian tradition, the sacred fire, Agni, plays a central role in rites of passage, marriage, and offerings to the gods. Whether the Indus people held similar beliefs is unknown, but the presence of fire-based rituals suggests a link to cosmic elements and transformation. One must also note the astronomical alignments in some settlements, particularly Dholavira. The city's layout, with its north-south orientation and specific ratios, hints at a possible cosmological understanding, a symbolic mapping of earth and sky. Certain wells and platforms may have been placed to mark solstices or seasonal changes, tying the heavens into the fabric of daily life. This convergence of water, fire, earth, and sky, all within urban planning, speaks to a worldview that saw the material and spiritual not as opposites, but as reflections of one another. Finally, we turn once more to silence the silence of lost voices, unwritten prayers, and unreadable scripts. Perhaps this is the most spiritual element of the Indus legacy, not the dogmas they left behind, but the mystery they preserved. In a world so rich with organization, beauty, and symmetry, the Indus people gave no monuments to ego, no kings to remember, no wars to glorify. What they gave instead were clues soft as the curve of a ceramic bowl, fleeting as the impression of a seal pressed into clay. Their religion, if we may call it that, may have been a spiritual ecology, a reverence for patterns, for water, for fertility, for fire, for stillness, a sacredness in symmetry, a holiness in hygiene, a devotion whispered rather than shouted. As we bring this chapter to a close, let us imagine once more the great bath still filled with water from the well, cool and silent beneath the rising moon. A figure enters slowly, lowering themselves into the pool, not to cleanse the body, but the soul. In the soft ripples, the stars reflect the heavens and the earth, meeting in quiet ceremony. Close your eyes now. Let the soft echo of ancient waters lull you toward sleep. The script may be unreadable, but the feeling remains deep, sacred, and still. As the centuries pass, something begins to shift in the cities of the Indus. Streets once swept daily now gather dust. Wells run a little lower. The baked brick walls crack, and the soft hum of industry of potters, bead makers, and traders fades to silence. This is not the sound of collapse in a single moment. It is a quiet unwinding, a slow, deliberate transition that historians call urban decline. From around 1900 BCE, signs begin to emerge. Major cities such as Mohenjo-daro and Harappa shrink in size and importance. Public buildings fall into disrepair. The quality of bricks diminishes. Kiln-fired bricks are replaced by sun-dried mud bricks, which are less durable. The once standardized weights and measures disappear. Streets become narrower, drains are clogged, and large, organized warehouses are abandoned. What caused this soft disintegration? There is no single answer, no invasion, no catastrophe written in blood. Rather, it appears that multiple factors, environmental, economic, and possibly social, intertwined to bring about the end of this remarkable urban culture. Let us begin with the environment. The Indus Valley civilization flourished in a delicate ecological balance. Its cities depended on rivers not just for water, but for trade, agriculture, and communication. But rivers, like civilizations, change course. Paleoclimatic and geological evidence suggests that the Ghaggar-Hakra River, possibly the ancient Saraswati, dried up during this period. Once a fertile lifeline for many settlements, it became seasonal, unreliable, and eventually vanished altogether. This shift may have been caused by tectonic activity, which diverted the rivers away from their original courses. Elsewhere, the mighty Indus River itself may have become more unpredictable, flooding some areas, drying others. Monsoons weakened over centuries, leading to droughts and water stress. Without stable water supplies, cities like Mohenjo-daro and Dholavira, carefully planned around wells, baths, and reservoirs, became difficult to sustain. Archaeological layers show increasing signs of abandonment, buildings left unfinished, pottery scattered, urban planning neglected. At Mohenjo-daro, the uppermost layers reveal hasty construction, with bricks reused from older structures. The sense of order that once defined the Indus cities begins to fragment. Yet environmental change alone does not tell the full story. Trade, too, seems to falter. The long-distance connections that once linked the Indus to Mesopotamia, Oman, and Central Asia grow faint. Cuneiform records from Mesopotamia refer to trade with Meluha, likely the Indus region, as early as 2300 BCE. These records mention Meluhan merchants arriving in Sumerian cities, bringing goods such as ivory, lapis lazuli, carnelian, and exotic woods. but after 1900 BCE, references to Meluha cease. Perhaps as rivers dried and agriculture declined, surpluses dwindled. Without goods to export, the trade routes fell silent. Ports, like Lothal, lost their purpose. The once thriving dockyards silted up, and the bustling exchanges gave way to quiet. Internally, the social and economic fabric of the civilization may have begun to fray. The standardization of bricks, weights, symbols was one of the great strengths of the Indus world. It suggested a shared system of control or governance, but over time, that uniformity disappears. Different regions begin to use local styles. Pottery becomes less refined. Writing, once consistent across the entire civilization, is used less and eventually vanishes altogether. This decentralization may reflect a loss of central coordination, perhaps due to changing leadership, internal unrest, or simply the practical challenges of maintaining control across such vast terrain during a period of environmental strain. And so, the great cities fade. But here is something extraordinary. The decline of the Indus Valley civilization is marked by an absence of destruction. There are no mass graves, no signs of warfare, no burned layers indicating widespread conquest or violence. The cities were not destroyed, they were abandoned. Some archaeologists once speculated about an invasion linking the decline of the Indus to the arrival of Indo-Aryan peoples from the northwest. This idea was based in part on ancient texts like the Rig Veda, which spoke of the destruction of cities. But modern scholarship has largely moved away from this theory. Genetic studies and archaeological evidence do not support a large-scale invasion at this time. Instead, the picture is one of gradual migration, adaptation, and dispersal. As the great cities declined, populations appear to have moved eastward toward the Ganges plain, where new agricultural lands beckoned. Villages grew up where once there had been cities. The urban became rural. The monumental became modest. And yet they did not vanish. The people of the Indus Valley civilization did not disappear. Their descendants lived on, adapting to new climates, new river systems, and new social structures. Some of their traditions likely continued woven into local practices, echoed in the architecture of later settlements, preserved in the memories passed from one generation to the next. In places like Rakhigarhi, Banawali, and Farmana, archaeologists have found transitional sites blending elements of the mature Indus culture with emerging new traditions. The pottery changes, the burial customs shift, and the urban planning grows simpler. Yet the thread of continuity is there. Over time, these threads may have contributed to the rise of the Vedic culture, which flourished along the Ganges. While distinct in many ways, this culture may have absorbed and transformed aspects of the earlier Indus world, from religious ideas to craft techniques. It is important to remember that civilizations do not die like people. They evolve, transform, and disperse. What we call a collapse is often a change in form, not a vanishing. The Indus Valley civilization, in this sense, did not end. It flowed onward, like the rivers it once embraced, dividing into streams, soaking into the soil, rising again in new places. As we close this chapter, let us return once more to Mohenjo-Daro. The streets are quiet now. The granaries are empty. The great bath, dry. But the bricks remain. The wells remain. The layout of the city, its balance, its symmetry still speaks of a people who cared deeply for order, beauty, and harmony. Even in decline, there is grace. The story of the Indus is not one of fire and fury, but of change, subtle, enduring, and quiet. Let that quiet wash over you now. Let your breath deepen. Let the stillness of those ancient streets become your own stillness. The story continues in whispers, in fragments, in dreams. Sleep now in the silence of the past. The cities of the Indus Valley lay buried beneath layers of silt and time for more than 3,000 years, forgotten by history, lost to memory. There were no legends of Harappa, no surviving records of Mohenjo-Daro. Unlike the pyramids of Egypt or the ruins of Rome, the Indus cities left behind no monumental fame, no timeless epic to preserve their names. But they waited, patiently, beneath the dust. And then, in the mid-19th century, the earth stirred. It began with railway engineers. In the 1850s, British officials in colonial India were laying tracks for the Lahore-Karachi Railway when they discovered large, uniform bricks in the vicinity of Harappa. They were sturdy and plentiful, perfect, they thought, for railway ballast. Thousands of ancient bricks were hauled away and crushed beneath steel. Only later did archaeologists begin to ask, what had they destroyed? In the 1920s, two men, Daya Ram Sani and R.D. Banerjee, began systematic excavations at Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. What they uncovered astonished the world. Here was a civilization older than Egypt, older than Mesopotamia, with cities of staggering sophistication. Here were drains, wells, streets, and seals, all from a world no one knew had existed. And yet, there were mysteries. So many mysteries. The script, though found on hundreds of seals and tablets, remains undeciphered to this day. The language it represents, if it is a full language, is unknown. No bilingual inscription has yet been found. Some scholars believe it is Proto-Dravidian. Others propose different linguistic families. But certainty eludes us. The people of the Indus left behind no readable texts, no king lists, no myths. Their world speaks to us only through artifacts, silent, elegant, and enigmatic. Archaeology has revealed thousands of sites since then, from Ganweriwala in the Cholistan desert to Kalibangan in Rajasthan. Each site adds more detail to the picture, yet the picture remains incomplete. The mystery has become part of the allure. And yet, while much remains unknown, much has been learned. We now understand that the Indus Valley civilization covered an area larger than any other Bronze Age civilization. We know it was urban, literate, and peaceful in character. We know its people were skilled in metallurgy, craftsmanship, water engineering, and urban planning. We know, too, that their society was complex, but perhaps not ruled by kings or warriors, as in Egypt or Mesopotamia. No royal tombs have been found, no grand statues of rulers. Power, if it existed, may have been collective or bureaucratic, not imposed by a single hand. And above all, we know that the Indus people were deeply attuned to balance between order and nature, between the individual and the city, between utility and beauty. Their legacy is not one of conquest or glory, but of quiet brilliance. Let us now take a moment to reflect on that legacy. In today's South Asia, traces of the Indus world persist in the cities, languages, arts, and rituals of the subcontinent. Many scholars believe that elements of modern Indian culture, from urban planning to craft traditions, may have roots that stretch back to the Harappans. The stepwells of Gujarat, the use of seals, the design of jewelry, even yoga-like postures found in ancient figurines, all may echo practices first cultivated along the Indus. Some see spiritual continuity as well. The Pashupati seal, with its horned figure seated in meditation surrounded by animals, bears resemblance to later depictions of Shiva. This is speculative yet evocative, a tantalizing thread that links the past to the present. Culturally, the rediscovery of the Indus changed the way South Asia saw its own history. No longer was civilization something that arrived with foreign invaders or imperial powers. It had been born, nurtured, and matured in the very soil of the subcontinent, long before the Ganges empires, long before the Mauryas or the Mughals. This has been a source of quiet pride and inspiration for archaeologists, historians, artists, and thinkers alike. And beyond India and Pakistan, the Indus story has become part of the broader human saga, a reminder that advanced civilizations, need not be defined by kings, wars, or monuments. Here was a culture that may have valued harmony over hierarchy, function over spectacle, and community over conquest. What lessons does it leave us? Perhaps that strength can be found in cooperation, that urban life can be clean, organized, and sustainable, that water, the quiet lifeblood of civilization, is to be cherished and respected, that we must listen not just to noise and power, but to the quiet patterns of life that sustain us. As the modern world faces its own questions of climate, urbanization, identity, the Indus Valley offers not solutions, but perspective. Its people built without walls of war. They traded across oceans, tended their cities with care, and adapted even as rivers changed and fortunes waned. And though their names are lost, their hands shaped a world that echoes still. Now, as we drift to the end of our journey, let us close with a moment of stillness. Imagine the city of Mohenjo-Daro beneath the stars, the wide streets silent in moonlight, a breeze blowing across the great bath, a lamp flickering behind a carved lattice, the scent of fired clay and river wind. Somewhere, a potter dreams of new designs. A child walks barefoot through the alleyways. Abid quesito el rendeli escodzait regelre. Life moves gently, without hurry. That city, its people, its ideas, its calm is gone, yet not gone. It remains in the soil, in the echoes, in the slow turning wheel of time. And now, it remains in you. Sleep now, with the wisdom of the ancients at your side. Let the quiet conquest of the Indus be your companion. The story is not over. It only begins again in dreams. Good night.